Hello, race fans. Welcome to what I think is the first race of the Earthbound Super Series Boogie Percent tournament of this season. Today we've got Softnum and MissDesGames. I'm your host, Aurelia, uh, doing com solo today, so this will be fun. So let's see. I don't think we got to run ads today because I'm not that cool a guy. So I'm sorry if you get pre-rolls or stuff in the middle of things. But we'll be getting started very shortly here. All right. Since this is the first race of the season, and also it's been a little while, it probably wouldn't hurt to actually kind of go over what Boogie Percent is. And some people could maybe use the refresher anyway, and maybe some of you have never actually seen Boogie Percent. That'd be cool. Boogie Percent is regular vanilla Earthbound. It's going to be raced from the Yep on the naming screen. It goes all the way through the normal glitchless route of the game until you defeat the Boogie Tent and take the jar of fly honey from the trash can. So this is a category that will probably take somewhere between an hour to an hour and a half for fairly competitive times. Um, Hopefully less than 2 hours. Since this is just regular old glitchless, the first, I would say, about 4.5 minutes or so are usually pretty set in stone. As long as everyone's movement is down, there won't be any kind of major divergence there until we actually start the hill climb. Other small details of the rules, just because this is, I think, the first one, so we'll kind of go over it in a little bit more detail than usual. There is not supposed to be any kind of random number generator manipulation in Boogie Percent. That is a feature of some glitchless runs. Some runners choose to use it, some runners choose to not use it, some runners actually just run both categories. Um, the random number generator in Earthbound is somewhat predictable, so if your movements are very precise and your menu inputs are very precise, then you can actually control what the game is going to quote unquote randomly do. So you could do the exact same walk up the hill every time with all the same inputs, and you will have the same spawns, which is to say, no spawns going up the hill. Starman will do the fastest actions, etc., etc. So you could actually get through ONET way, way faster since you can, I would say, play riskier, but there is no risk as long as you make no mistakes. So in order to make this a little bit more accessible, Boogie Percent does not allow for random number generator manipulation. This is Boogie Percent was originally intended to be kind of like a lead-in category, an introduction to the entire glitchless run. However, a full glitchless run is like 4.5 hours ish, we'll say. I mean, the real good people do it like an hour faster. Um, New people will probably take somewhere between 6.5 and 8 hours. So it's a long run. And Boogie Percent has stayed kind of popular as its own category. So here we are. What other random tidbits? Turbo controllers are allowed. There's a lot of text mashing in this. We don't want you to destroy your fingers, so you are more than welcome to use Turbo. If you both use Turbo and use an emulator, then we suggest that you do show your inputs on screen. That's the only real limitation there. But yeah, let's see. For those interested that are here this morning, I believe we also have more races scheduled this afternoon or evening. I believe there is one race scheduled at Time zones. 7:30 Eastern time, 6:30 Central, 4:30 Pacific, something like that. That'll be Hyconic versus Rain, and there may be another one also being scheduled around that time. It's not set in stone yet, though. So if you find this race interesting, be sure to tune in later today. We'll also have races throughout the rest of this week. This is the kickoff of the Boogey% tournament, so there will be all kinds of races scheduled throughout the week. The races are going to be scheduled in a Swiss format, so there's going to be 24 participants this year, I believe. Yeah, 24 racers. So we'll be trying to get 12 races in this first week here. So that will average out to more than one race per day, hopefully. All right, so here we are, 4 minutes, 20 seconds plus in. And we're through kind of the opening demo, so to speak. So here we are on the actual hill climb. Oh yeah, that's another good point. So another small tidbit. For those that have maybe watched some of the randomizer tournaments, the racers are not allowed to watch the other racers in the randos because you'll glean a lot of information that you didn't have to go check yourself. So there's an obvious advantage to be gained there. To contrast against that, if you want to watch your opponent in Boogey%, I believe that we do allow that. So you can kind of see where your opponent's at and maybe tune your strategy accordingly. If you know you have some time to spare, maybe you're going to play things more safely. If you know you need to make some big play, then you can attempt to make that big play. And then you probably don't normally make it because it's pretty risky. Softnum is got some rough spawns here, but that is a crow that should be stuck on that bush. Yep, so you can get around there, but that is the risk of running past that crow, is that if you get a dog on the next spawn tile, you are stuck fighting the dog. So a little bit of bad luck there for Softnum. Des, though, not having too much of a trouble with the hill climb. But in the grand scheme of things, hill climb is just the first area where there can be a divergence between the runners. Usually, hill climb does not result in a huge difference in times, and there are lots of things in ONET that will result in large differences in times if they occur. So hopefully, we don't see too much of that today. Good, clean racing, as they say. That's what I want to see. Softnum just got this one last spawn tile to get past, and here we are. So Softnum will be able to talk to BuzzBuzz, get BuzzBuzz into the party. Des walking down to do the Starman fight. That's kind of typically our first real split. So at that point, we'll kind of have a good sense of the difference between the two runners. The Starman fight is safe unless you grind a whole bunch and make it purposely unsafe yourself. So the only thing that can really happen there is that you randomly take extra time or not as much time as your opponent. And I should also mention the variance on that is not that large. Worst case, Starman spams fire every turn and makes it take forever, and BuzzBuzz hits for not very much. Best case, BuzzBuzz smashes and Starman Jr. either guards or freezes. So here's a freeze. That's actually nice to see on Dessa's side. More like more like D's. All right, so a 743 Starman for Des. So that's a pretty solid Starman. That is a reasonable glitchless time. I would be happy with that if I got that, I would say. Softnum looks like he may be coming in a little bit closer to 9 minutes, but that can happen if you take a fight on the hill. That is not unreasonable, especially in races. And that is also a thing to remember too. This is a race, so your time is important. You don't want to post some like 2-hour time, but you also want to defeat your opponent. So, strats that you may choose in a regular glitchless run where you are happy to press the reset button when things don't go your way. You may not want to choose those strategies in a race. We can talk about that briefly. Hopefully, we don't see it. Commentators curse and all. But forfeits. If you choose to forfeit out of your Swiss rounds, you lose, obviously. You also get assigned a 3-hour time. 3 hours, pretty bad. I would expect that anyone just literally like following a guide, like looking at it for the first time, following alongside the game, should be able to complete Boogie percent in less than 3 hours. Des. Zzz, got it. I missed the exact time, but for argument's sake, it looks like about a 950 Starman for Softnum. So here, we are going to be purchasing some gear, pretty much the bare minimum that we can get away with to defeat the Sharks, defeat Frank, and also defeat Frankenstein. I'm not going to say this is 100% safe, because it isn't, especially if you have bad luck and bad stat rolls. However, usually this does not go too poorly. So you can get the Mr. Baseball cap from the treehouse. You can actually sell that. It's worth like 98 bucks. You can walk down, sell that for 98. You'll buy yourself a T-ball bat. You'll buy yourself a regular baseball cap. The difference in defense is like 1 or 2. It's not that much. And you get yourself a cheap bracelet, and that's usually good enough to go. The walk that you just saw on Dez's side is actually kind of important. If you can execute that walk exactly right, you will negate like 1 or 2 of those spawn plates from making any sharks. So the game decides where to place enemies on the map via spawn tiles. These spawn tiles are they're like literal tiles inside the like game's map. The whole map is kind of tiles. So sorry, I'm trying to explain this in like a non-technical way. Depending on how you walk, those enemies can either not load in, or they'll load in and immediately despawn themselves. So if an enemy walks off like the edge of the map, the game keeps a little bit more of the map loaded than what you are like presented with on the screen, but not a lot. So if you walk back and forward, those enemies will go away. And you can kind of use that fact and how you walk with spawn tiles to make sure that you have fewer random encounters that you have to deal with. Hopefully that makes sense. Dez is up to Frank. Frank is, unless you have really poor stats, you can usually just life up or heal anytime Frank knifes you, and then otherwise bash, and then you're usually safe. This is a little scary, though. 26 knives are really scary. Those are actually the stats that can get you into trouble, but not this time. Lucky enough. Because at 20 HP, you may not be able to mash out the heal before your HP rolls down to 0. That is the danger. So that's the kind of thing that you don't really have too much control over. If you have no control over your stat level ups. So if you get unlucky there, then you get unlucky there. Softnum grabbing the can of fruit juice as a small little backup heal. Nothing wrong with that. It can, depending on exactly how much damage you take, it can basically buy you one extra hit that you don't have to worry about from the enemies. So, as a safety strat, yeah, can of fruit juice, I approve. Dez getting through Frank and Frankenstein at about 1350. It's a pretty darn good time for Frank. That is the nothing has really gone wrong, and you're just trucking along. That is a perfectly reasonable time. And there will be plenty of time for things to potentially go wrong. So this is definitely still a race. Softnum using a burger to heal before fighting the Yes Man Jr. Typically, I mean, I'm an old washed up speedrunner, so I take all of my advice with a grain of salt. But I would choose to use the life ups before the consumable items because pretty much no matter what, after you fight Frank and Frankenstein, you're going to go back and talk to Frank and get your psychic points back. But if Frank is pretty tame, you may actually be able to save some of your burgers. So you might be able to hold on to those. I would much rather have spare burgers than have spare psychic points. That's kind of my point. And at this level, they're both going to be full heals anyway, so whatever. Softnum, yeah, missed the life up there. Really needed to heal after Frank used the knife. But that's okay. Of all of the deaths to take in Onet, that is probably one of the least consequential ones. And I should say, it's an easy mistake to make, especially in a race. Races make everything just a little bit different. You have just a little bit more stress, a little bit more pressure, and it's easy to make simple mistakes. However, since Softnum did take a death and walk out of the house, we also get this little photo man cutscene. Dez is walking into Ant Cave, Giant Step Hill, whatever you want to call it. Everybody has a different name for it, I feel. Or I do, and everyone else uses the same name. I don't know. But finding some slugs right away, that's always a great feeling. Sometimes the slug grind can be painful, even if you like know the perfect way to try to grind for them. Sometimes the game still does not cooperate. But this is kind of, yeah, the ideal place to spawn. There's at only 3 slugs. Nope, it's 4. Perfect. So you can kind of walk back and forth across that small tile there. I would say Dez is doing it just about perfect. So kind of use this as a guide, if you will, if you're not familiar with where to try to grind for these spawns. Whether or not you want to grind for all of your slugs on the bottom floor, or you're just going to grind for most of them and then try to catch a 6-pack on the top floor, that I feel is kind of runner's preference. Getting the 6-pack on the top floor is probably technically a little bit faster overall, however, there's more risk involved. So, risk-reward ratio, I feel it's very important to evaluate where you're falling on that in a race. If you're just going for your fastest boogie percent time, yeah, do the fastest thing. If you're actually racing somebody else, well, maybe not always go as ham as possible, right? Softnum's got Frank down. That's a good start. And with this level here, Frankenstein should be safe unless something crazy happens here. So Softnum should be in business here for the next few minutes, hopefully. I say that because I didn't mention this during the Frankenstein Mark II fight. Frankenstein has a scripted battle Script, yeah, a scripted script. I'm sorry. It's early, forgive me. He will always use a puff of steam, and then he will punch. And then he will use a puff of steam, and now it's random. He will either tear into you or just punch. The tear into you does more damage. The punch does like the regular damage he did the first time. And then puff of steam attack, puff of steam attack, puff of steam attack. So that fight, as long as you go in there with some way to heal at least once, it's pretty darn safe. If you have two heals, you can afford to miss multiple times, so you'll be okay. The heal from Frank, you do actually have to step out and back into that little area behind the arcade to heal. Yep, that is I don't know why they chose to do it that way, but they did. Dez is also using a little mechanic there that I haven't explained yet. And sorry if I'm going overboard with explaining mechanics, but this is the first Bogey percent race of the season, so I feel like I should be explaining all of these things. The walking that you saw on Dez's screen looked kind of like choppy for a few seconds there. That's not the stream. That is intentional movement by the runner. These enemies that have a movement pattern where they only move when you move, you can, if you like briefly do the input and let go and briefly do the input and let go, like for just a couple frames, you can kind of like move before the enemies, I'll say, realize that you're moving, and then they won't follow you. So if you can do that perfectly, the enemies will never move. If you do it pretty good, they'll just move just a tiny bit, and usually that's good enough. So that's what we call stutter stepping. So if you ever hear the phrase stutter stepping, that's what that is. So the stutter stepping technique is very important in the giant hill ant cave, because almost all of the enemies in here, all of the enemies in here, the slugs, the ants, and the mice, all have that movement pattern where they only move when you move. So if you can stutter step around stuff, then you can pretty much just walk through the cave and only fight things that you choose to fight. There's a small caveat there. Stutter stepping does become harder as there are more and more enemies on screen, just because the game gets kind of laggy. Um, if there's literally the maximum number of spawns on screen, it starts turning more into luck than skill at that point. I mean, you need a certain amount of skill to have any chance of pulling it off, but even if you were really, really good, you still got to be lucky too at that point. Softnum, doing this nice little walk up here to the shack. Yeah, so if you hit the very right side of the door to the shack, you'll skip a brief little text box that tells you that the door is locked. So that's why you'll see the runners walking up to the right side of the door there. It's a very small time save, but it's pretty easy to pull off, so there's no reason not to go for it. Softnum is also trying some stutter stepping here and is mostly successful. Yeah, that's good enough. So you can use stutter stepping to despawn enemies. That's another example. So you can use it to walk past enemies you don't want to fight, or you can make them stay in the same place while you walk away from them and then get them off the screen. Softnum looks like he's going to stutter to the door and despawn the enemies that way instead. For a moment here, I'm going to turn our attention to Dez, who's now fighting Titanic Ant. This is the first, I'll say, major fight. It's easy to lose a ton of time here if you die to Ant and have to make another trip back. So this is a significant fight to see how this goes. The general strategy is to open with two Rockins. If you take a big hit from Ant at the beginning, you'll heal in between those two Rockins. Both Rockins hit 480-ish, which is what's very slightly above average for Rockin, so that's not too bad. So that's a good start to this fight. Then if you take the safety strat of purchasing burgers before you entered the cave, then you can pretty much treat this like a Frank fight and just heal every time Ant attacks you. And I think that is the way to go in a race, because as you can see right there, if Ant chooses to be very mean and attack you repeatedly, it very quickly becomes lethal. So in a race, I recommend, I love safety strats. You're going to hear me talk about those a lot. I recommend buying burgers. Um, Now, if you're doing a glitchless run or you're going for the fastest boogie percent time, then maybe not. And then if Ant is particularly cruel, then you just reset. But you don't get that luxury in a race. Take some stuff with you to ensure your victory. So Dez has got Titanic Ant down. What, 23 minutes, I'll say 30 seconds or so for hitting the Sanctuary. So that is a very solid time. Um, I feel that will probably be competitive through the whole tournament. So Dez will now be walking out to go fight Captain Strong and then hopefully make way to Tucson. Softnum is on the slug grind. That is a good question, Sharpless. The Game Boy Advance version. I'm assuming you're referring to Mother 1 plus 2. That is a different enough game that we consider. Yeah, I would say it's banned for the tournament. For this, it should be. You could use obviously the SNES version of the game. Console or a reasonable emulator. That's your decision and whatever you can capture. So that's kind of up to you. Those are acceptable. Um, let's see, Wii U version that would be acceptable. Not many people have that one though. The SNES Classic version that would be acceptable. Trying to think of what other releases are out there. It's on Switch now too, right? That would be acceptable. But yeah, the Game Boy Advance version plays pretty different. All right, so Dez is now starting the sequence, the cop fight. So you'll actually fight 4 of these regular cop enemies, and then you'll fight Captain Strong. You fight them all back to back. You don't get a chance to heal out of combat in between them. So this is kind of an exercise in watching how much damage you take, keeping in mind what items you have available to heal, and kind of trying to juggle all of this information and how much damage you've done to the enemy you're currently fighting. You're trying to juggle all of that information to decide when should I heal, when should I attack. So this is actually a little bit complicated, and everybody kind of has. I mean, there are general guidelines for sure. I think pretty much everybody would agree you should be healing if you're under 50 HP, no matter what. But everybody kind of has their own guidelines for what to do in what cases exactly. Each cop typically will go down in about 3 bashes, assuming that you don't miss. If you're under 50 hit points, you definitely want to be healing. There's also an argument to be made to heal like before you go into the strong fight, so that you can just kind of spam rockin' and try to get through that as fast as possible. But I've also heard of other schools of thought on that too. So it's interesting to see how each runner will approach this series of fights. On the surface, it just seems like, okay, you fight enemy, 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 boss, whatever. Strategically, it's actually kind of interesting. Softnum is checking experience. Currently still level 7, looks like. Softnum may be going for the pack at the top. Although getting into a mouse fight, so that may or may not change the strategy. The mouse can be scary if he lands smash attacks on you. He's very likely to do so. That's kind of his mechanic. But if he doesn't, he's not a big deal, and his XP's okay. It's not the optimal fight to take for experience, but it's not that bad. Dez opting to play it a little bit safer against Captain Strong, not spamming rockin' after taking that large hit on the first round, and that I think is probably the right play. You can. I'll explain why that is. So, Rockin' is not guaranteed damage. That's the reason why it is not safe to just spam Rockin' against Captain Strong. Rockin' actually does a comparison between the enemy's speed and your speed. It does this under the hood. It doesn't really tell you about this part. So essentially, Rockin has a chance to miss enemies that you are not at least twice as fast as. And Ness is not that fast. So Rockin usually has a chance to miss just about anything. A small chance, but it still exists. So you want to be careful that you don't go to spam Rockin and then you take some damage, and then you take your second Rockin and then, oh crap, I missed. He's not dead, and now I took lethal damage. That's like the worst case scenario. Unlikely, but the kind of thing that I personally will plan against in a race, because I like to. My first strat is to avoid forfeiting at all costs, and then after that, I try to go fast. So I try to avoid things that would be disastrous. Um, Dez, I was kind of talking over that little fight there. Caught a fight with a mushroom there. The mushrooms have I'll say a small aggro radius. So a small radius where they're going to come run after you and try to attack you. And a lot of runners try to like flirt that boundary because if you don't have to despawn, you save a lot of time. But I think Dez cut it just a little bit too close there. You can even get so close that you walk right on the very edge of it, and the mushroom will take one step towards you and then stop. And that's like, oh, that's perfect. That is the literal perfect movement to get past a mushroom. Um, but trying to judge that just with your eyes is pretty tough. So, but the mushroom fight was not a big deal. Didn't get a mushroom out of it. Didn't take a bunch of damage out of it. So, not a big deal. Softnum getting the auto win there. I missed whether Softnum's level 8 now and that was a single Antoid or if that was just a single slug spawn. Up on the top there, that really could have been either. Must be level 8 because it looks like Softnum is going to go fight Titanic Ant now. So far, Dez is having an excellent Boogey percent run. That one mushroom is like the only thing that I would say has gone, I'll say wrong, I'll put that in quotes, because things can go far, far more wrong than that. Minor time loss, that's it. Softnum had the one death to Frank, and that is it so far. So Dez has an extremely competitive time. Softnum doesn't have a bad time, I would say. It's just not as outstanding, that's all. Yeah, sure, that's a good point. We're half an hour into this, so it probably wouldn't hurt to explain this again. Yep, Boogey Percent is a race. It's vanilla Earthbound, no hacks, no randomizers, anything of the sort. So it's just a race to go from yep on the naming screen through the normal progression of the game, no glitches either. You want to go fight Boogey Tent, you want to get the fly honey, and that's time. Sorry. So it's about 1/4 of a full glitchless run. That's kind of why we choose to stop at Boogey Tent. So that's why Boogey Tent, and Boogey Percent is a catchy name, I suppose. Softnum, I saw, caught a fight there with 3 Antoids, or maybe it was 2 and turned into 3, which is unlucky and unfortunate, but also not the worst thing to have to deal with. So, coming down here, I'm guessing Softnum is going to take some safety strat here, probably purchase some burgers, and then go fight Titanic Ants. That is what I would assume from what I'm currently seeing. The other thing to mention about buying these burgers is if you want to take the safety strat, If you wind up not needing the burgers against Titanic Ant, then you just take them to Captain Strong, and then you have safety burgers for Strong. If you use all your burgers fighting Titanic Ant, then, well, you needed them. And if you want more burgers for Strong, you can go buy more burgers. It's not that much of a time loss to go buy the burgers versus the amount of safety it gives you in a race. That's my personal opinion, anyway. You'll see some people completely fill up their inventory with burgers. That's me. Some people will just buy a couple burgers. Some people will choose not to do it at all and just say, I'm going for it. And I think those people are nuts in races, and then they get a better time than me, and I go, okay, fair enough. Um, I'll also go ahead and explain too. This is the first race of the Boogie Percent tournament for the season. This year we are doing the Swiss bracket or Swiss bracketing. We're doing Swiss for our seeding for brackets. So this first round is completely random. So runners of varied levels of experience will be against each other. So after the first round of Swiss, things will kind of um, Swiss will do its thing, so to speak. And the last point will make for that, for those that were not here at the start, is I believe we have 24 participants this year. So I would expect to see 12 races here in this first week. We do have another race coming up this evening at what, 7:30 Eastern, 6:30 Central, 4:30 Pacific, something like that. There may also be a second race getting scheduled this evening, but it's not set in stone yet. So if you're interested in seeing more Boogie Percent, be sure to tune in this evening and check it out then. I don't. I won't say I'm not doing the commentary, but I don't think I'm doing that commentary. I think it's already covered. I haven't looked. Dez, erasing the pencil at 36 minutes 10 seconds. I want to say that's probably like my glitchless, non-manip like PB pace. Honestly, that is an outstanding time for erasing the pencil. What is a schedule? Okay, so on Softnum's screen, this is kind of what I was talking about here. So there's what, probably about 9 enemies, 10 enemies, 10 enemies, because there's a pack of six, a pack of two, and a pack of two. Um, so you're pretty much at like the spawn limit on screen. So trying to stutter there is going to be extremely difficult. You have to be good at stuttering in the first place to have a chance, and then you also need to get lucky that the game kind of like lets it happen. Perfect. There we go. So this evening you can expect Derek, IQ Unlimited, and Attack Slug. They are all very good commentators, and you should watch this evening. I did it. I plugged this afternoon. But seriously, no, they are good, and you should listen. So here we see this is actually a little bit of a divergent point in terms of routing. Some runners will choose to do something slightly different on Dez's screen. Dez purchased some croissants, and I missed a little bit there. I'm assuming that a Holmes hat was purchased and the Sandlot bat. You can actually walk up, instead of walking in a U shape to get into Happy Happy Village, you can walk to the upper left. The present that's up there contains a hard hat. You can buy that hard, or you can go grab that hard hat and not buy a Holmes hat. Hard hat is more defense than Holmes hat, so it's a little bit safer if you want to go that route, and then you also don't have to buy the Holmes hat. Um, that used to be a little bit more common when we were doing RNG manipulation just to get through Onet, because that defense would make this particular fight that you currently see on Deza's screen a little bit safer. But some people still choose to do it for this as well, because it still makes this fight safer too. You just maybe don't need that much safety. That's one that I usually do not choose to do unless like the path is wide open to the left, and then to the right it's a bunch of spawns, and it's like, well, I'm kind of walking that way anyway, so I might as well. And that is a vicious Titanic Ant on Softnum's screen. I can talk about that a little bit briefly as well. Titanic Ant, I don't think his attacks are named differently. But under the hood, one is I'll call it a weak attack. It's a normal attack. It's a 2 times offense attack. And he also has a strong attack, a 4 times offense attack. So what that means is he has an attack that will hit you in the mid 20s, and he has an attack that will hit you in the mid 40s. Obviously, that's pretty significant if you only have, between 82 and 90 HP, depending on how many levels you chose to get for Titanic Ant. Most runners, I believe, nowadays, back in my day, most runners will probably grind to level 8 and then go fight Titanic Ant. That gives you access to your favorite thing, Alpha, which you absolutely need for that fight to clear out the chaff. And that's pretty much like the minimum you can get away with. You can grind to level 9 instead. It doesn't take that much extra time, especially if you're having some luck or you're very good at the slug grind. You can choose to grind to level 9. You'll get a little bit more HP, get a little bit more offense, you may get a little bit more defense, and it gives you just a little bit more safety in that Titanic Ant fight. But that is enough of a difference in time that most runners choose not to do it. Okay, Dez is starting the Car Painter fight, so we're going to take a look at that there. We had one Lightning Reflect, which is very big. For 143, that's a huge hit. Car Painter on the second round will life up himself. He lifed up for 111 with a life up alpha, so that was also a large life up, unfortunate. But if Car Painter hits himself with lightning in the first round, a common strat is to use PSI Rockin' on him. I will just call your favorite thing Rockin' from here forward. To try to load up that damage and kind of keep yourself out of the slog of a very long Car Painter fight. Car Painter reflected a second lightning against himself after that, and then a bash was enough to finish him off. So that was a very fast Car Painter fight. I'll call it a good Car Painter fight. I have no issue with that. The kind of meta strat that's going on in that fight, and the reason why I hesitate slightly to say it was like the perfect Car Painter fight. Most runners after this point will choose to Death Warp out of Happy Happy Village and get yourself back into Tucson. Very technically, if you had 0 spawns, it's actually faster to walk back to Tucson. You're bonkers if you choose that strat, but if you really want to go for like, I need this to go as fast as possible, it's technically faster if you see 0 spawns. Is it really going to be faster for you? Probably not. Like, go buy a lotto ticket, but it can be. So most runners are going to choose to Death Warp out of here. So what you're the metagame you're playing at that time is you're also trying to keep Ness's HP as low as possible without, dying in that fight and having to take that entire walk back. So the Car Painter fight was fast. That was good. It was very safe. I like that part. But Ness comes out of it with 73 HP, so that kind of complicates your Death Warp. So the Car Painter part goes fast. The Death Warp, this might take a little bit longer than it needs to. But you never know. We'll see how this plays out. Just trying to explain some of the kind of what decisions are being made in that fight and why. I appreciate the compliment. Thank you. Um, but once again, Dez is absolutely cruising. Oh, we got a commercial break in progress. Perfect. Very good. So I'll explain a little bit of what's probably going on in this fight under the hood. Um, uh, so we walk into the sanctuary fight. Um, Not the sanctuary fight. We walk into the sanctuary. We take the first fight we can see. That mole is almost always spawned there. Very, very, very likely. Um, so hold on, my internet's being a butt. Okay, it looks like it's a little bit better now. Okay, so you take the first fight, you go in there. There's a mole. He can usually slash you with his claws. It'll do plenty of damage to Polish. She's level 1. She has no defensive equipment. You throw away the teddy bear on purpose, so that's all fine. Um, Ness has some levels. He has some hit points. You throw away all his defensive equipment, so he'll take okay damage from the mole, but at 73 HP, it's going to take several attacks for him to actually go down. So what you'll see in that fight is usually runners will use Ness's ATM card. You don't want to just defend because then you're going to take half damage from the mole. That's kind of contrary to why you're there. So using the ATM card is a dead turn that also doesn't have the damage you take. So that's why you'll see that for there. But Dez is already turning or talking to Paula's dad, so that Death Warp fight went pretty well, I would say. Softnum is in the fight with Titanic Ant, used all of his psychic points. I can see based on bashing for 11 points that Titanic Ant has probably put up a shield. So he usually does that. On the one hand, it's not that great because it halves the damage that Ant's going to take from 3 of your attacks. On the other hand, that's him not doing damage to you, so I'm pretty okay with that. He can spam Shield Alpha if that's what he wants to do. Seems like it's locked up on my side. So we'll see how this plays out. Another thing to consider when you're in this fight with Ant, you may want to heal after every bash, and I do mean like every attack that you take, because if he does a strong attack and you get a low roll on the burger that you use to heal, then you basically just healed the amount of damage that you just took. So you may wind up doing it more than once. Um, on Deza's side, this is just kind of like a little bit of quest cleanup here. Usually there's not a lot of time to be saved or lost here. Um, there is a photo right outside the Chaos Theater, so that's why you saw some kind of maybe unusual movement just outside the theater. It was to avoid a photo trigger. Softnum having some technical issues. Um, I do see at least, yeah, my internet's gonna not handle multiple streams very well. That's why I don't restream. But I do see Softnum is through the Titanic Ant fight. Um, this is another point I'll make, just because it is the first of the Boogie Percent series. Uh, One thing that we do request of runners, um, we prefer if runners make local recordings of their runs. not strictly required, but in cases like this where maybe your internet is struggling or, some kind of issue comes up, then hey, you still have a video of your recording. Like, not that we don't trust most runners or something, but like, if your internet completely goes out, then okay, you as the runner in the middle of the race don't need to worry about it. You just keep running, you finish your run, and then at the end, we say, okay, here's my video. I finished the race at X time, and we have something to compare it against. So that it's not necessarily like a I mean, like it's nice to have the insurance if somebody like wants to proof call you or something, I suppose. We usually don't see very much of that, but it's more for the you as the runner don't need to worry about whatever your internet's doing. You just race, and we can compare it afterward if we have to. Um, I do see Softnum up currently in the cop fights. It looks pretty typical so far. I don't see anything too crazy going on there. Here's a little bit of fun that you'll hear in the community sometimes. Des went to the right side of the KS uh, Runaway 5 bus. Um, some people go to the left side of the bus. I prefer the right side. It's like super minor, but like so keep in mind when we walked into the Chaos Theater, we avoided a photo trigger. That photo trigger is still there, so if you just walked straight down, you would hit that photo trigger. So that's why you'll see the runners kind of walking. I will describe it as a blocky shape going around the bus. It's to avoid that photo trigger a second time. If you did hit it on the way in, then just take the shortest path. Don't bother. If you already wasted the time on the photo, you may as well save what you can. Dez is now entering Threed. Sorry. Falling out of my own chair. I am competent, I swear. Uh, so Threed, this little segment here actually does have a small component that can be a pain. Um, So for this little part of the game, you'll need to walk up into the graveyard, see that there are some zombies up here in the corner. Like you can talk to people and get some plot, but the things that are strictly necessary is walking through this graveyard. Um, and I want to talk about those spawns, but I just want to explain this part too. Um, there are a bunch of spawns in this graveyard, so this graveyard can be a pain. Um, if you get into a fight here, it's very easy to wipe, and then the death itself is not a big time loss, but then you have to do the walk again. So yeah, this could repeat ad infinitum if you are unlucky or not skilled. So it's a thing to watch out for. So on Deza's screen at the beginning of that, there were a ton of enemies, right? But it's nice to be able to make that analysis talking to the no problem here lady. Um, it is very good to be able to make the analysis that all of these spawns exist, but they're going to get caught on terrain. He's going to get caught on a gravestone. He's going to get caught on a gravestone. He's going to get caught on a tree, and just walk right on through anyway. It's very easy to see enemies and go and despawn them. It is faster, obviously, but takes a higher level of proficiency to look at all those enemies and say, yes, they're there. No, they're not a concern for me. So we've got a 52, 45-ish, I'll say, for starting winters on Deza's side, which is still just an excellent time so far. Softnum is making it into Tucson, which is very good to see. Um, on Softnum's side, we will be getting the Pencil eraser from Apple Kid after we make one trip to see that a pencil is blocking our path. You'll want to give money to Apple Kid first, otherwise you'll wind up having to like walk back and forth through the cave to set up the trigger to get the pencil eraser. You can fix it if you do it in the wrong order. It just wastes extra time, that's all. Um, it's an interesting choice to save in the hotel and get your money from the hotel. I think most people choose to use the department store. I think that is a little bit faster. There's no door transition that you have to worry about for the ATM machine. But that's not a big deal either way. It does with a minor little mismenu there. Yeah, just throw throw that spray can on the floor. You don't need that. You really don't need it in this category, hopefully. But otherwise, this part in Winters also, it's just like plot and pretty scripted and not much getting in your way until we get outside of here. So as long as you know what to do, not much time to gain or lose here. Um, but after after we fetch Bubble Monkey from the shop, well, then we get back to dealing with spawns and such again. Or, good lord, I've seen it. I can count it on one hand, but I've seen it more than once. I won't name the poor runners that have completely neglected to grab the monkey and walk all the way down to Tessie with no Bubble Monkey. That does not work. You will have to make the entire trip back and go get the monkey and then back again. So don't do that. The game does not stop you from walking down there without the monkey. Um, so there are some strategies you can use here in Winters. The monkey is kind of absent-minded. He will walk behind you closely for a while, and then he'll get distracted, and then he'll want like look around, and then he'll like sprint to catch back up to you. If enemies touch Bubble Monkey, you are in a fight. Obviously, if enemies touch you, you are also in a fight. You can try to use this like catch-up mechanic of Bubble Monkeys to like catch an enemy from behind, and you can use it to get a green swirl and then just run away from the fight or punch it really fast or whatever you choose to do. That's up to you. Um, but you can try to use Bubble Monkey like that. It's not easy, and there is still like some randomness involved there. But you can use that to try to get green swirls. Um, that said, when you're trying to like dodge past enemies, just run past them really quick so they don't get you. You do also have to plan for the fact that you don't know when Bubble Monkey is just going to stop, and Lord knows he's going to stop right in the middle of your path and get you caught with the enemy. So, I mean, he might not, but if you're not lucky, that's probably what he's going to do. So this is the little Tessie cutscene. Oh, we're in an ad break. Well, for those of you that can see, this is the Tessie cutscene. Get your MS Paint beasts in chat. Affectionately named MS Paint Beast. He, he, that's definitely something I would whip up in MS Paint. But he's cute. He's dorky. Look at him. He's just happy to be here. He's just a little guy. And away he goes. Look at that. Exactly the length of an ad break. Poor guy. Alas. Softnum got up to seeing the pencil and is on the walk back. He caught some spawns in the cave on the walk there, I believe. Fought some sprouts, um, which can happen. The little caves between the areas are kind of rough with spawns. You really have no choice but to hit the doors and try to go back and forth. So. Dez is currently fighting the worthless protoplasm. This guy is a jerk. If he wants to murder Jeff, then Jeff will be murdered. There's just no way around that. um, it's silly, but he can absolutely you no matter how you play that, if the game doesn't want you to progress, you will not. There's no choice there. Um, I can explain this movement on Dez's screen, though. So you don't necessarily have to fight this duck. If you can move the duck down into this like little corridor far enough, then usually you don't have to worry about fighting him. Ooh, all right. I thought he was going to be stuck on that little rock thing there. Um, but in my opinion, anywhere down in this little corridor is kind of good enough. Usually I don't take a ton of time trying to get this duck skip. If I can get him to where he is right now, then I will just try to skirt past him with the monkey. Um, that is a great setup for the duck. So unless he like gets himself super loose, that's definitely a skip. Yep. So that's one way to avoid a fight, and the fight is not 100% safe. If the duck wants to murder you, it can. It's less likely than the protoplasm. The duck has a lot of wasted turn actions. Um, but if he wants to be a jerk, he can. And then the movement for that third enemy, that's another worthless protoplasm in the present that was charging you. You can actually, if you start at the very top and the enemy begins to charge you, while that enemy is like charging you, it's just going to move where you were. It's not going to update based on where you are, it's just going to go to where you were. So you can then walk down and left and get past it. The risk there is that Bubble Monkey just stands in place and stares at the box. But if he doesn't do that, or you kind of like try to, I've seen some runners like try to force him to do his like absent-minded standing in place thing, and then when he starts to run after you, then do that movement. That's another way to try to do that, what we call the second protoplasm skip. So you get around that enemy and don't have to fight that one either. Technically, you can also skip the first protoplasm. Kind of bonkers to do. It takes very precise movement, and you kind of have to like pull the present up a little bit and around, and then you can go down past it. Not easy at all, but it has been done. Dez took a slug fight in the pond cave here. It's not ideal, but of the fights that you could take in this what we call pond cave area, um, it's not that bad. Eight months, y'all are bonkers. Why not? You can shout yourself out. I don't do what you want. Softnum, still having some internet issues, but looks like got into a fight with some mushrooms, and maybe there was another enemy in there too, I think. Got the mushroom on your head. So what the mushroom on your head does, for those that are not familiar, after a certain amount of time out of combat, it will mess with your D-pad inputs. So when you were walking to the right, suddenly you'll be walking up instead, or down, or to the left. It's randomized. So then you kind of have to reorient how to move yourself, and then a minute later it'll change again and again and again. You can actually sell the mushroom to that healer in the hospital. That's how you cure that status effect. In combat, you're basically confused. It's not quite as bad as feeling strange, the other form of confusion. You're less likely to waste your turn or hit the wrong target, but there's still a chance, and that's a pretty nasty thing. So Des is through Pond Cave. It was a pretty good walk, I would say. No protoplasm deaths, so that is always good. One extra fight in the Pond Cave, and spawns were kind of cooperative. So getting onto the Skyrunner here, just shy of 1 hour and 4 minutes, is a very, very competitive time. That is very solid. So all Des has left is the Boogey tent itself and the walk to it. Something could go wrong on the walk to it as well. That has happened in the past. Commercial break in progress, but that's a good time for the commercial break. That's fine. There's just the cutscene there, so there's nothing to worry about or try to explain that's happening off screen. Softnum looks like they got into another fight with sprouts in the cave. Those sprouts in the center of the cave are kind of a pain to despawn. They're like right at the threshold where it seems like maybe you could walk to the left and despawn them, and then you actually couldn't, and you did have to hit the door to despawn them. So that can be a thing. So here we are with Softnum, erasing the pencil at 1:05:35-ish, I'll say. So Softnum will be going up finishing the walk through Peaceful Rest Valley. Shouldn't get ahead of myself. The walk through Peaceful Rest Valley is kind of risky, and there are a lot of spawns. It is not easy. Um, then going to the shack, we'll have the cultists fight there, and then we'll be fighting Carpainter after that. On Dez's side, we are back, and the Skyrunner cutscene is completed. Um, Jeff will join the party, and we'll get ourselves situated to go fight the Boogey tent. Looks like Softnum was just barely caught by that spinning robo. The enemies in Peaceful Rest Valley are all, I'm going to say they're all kind of jerks. If they're very cooperative, then you may get out of the fight without taking any damage. If they are big old jerks and they attack every round, it can be really rough. And it looks like it was closer to the latter for Softnum in that fight. Des, in the walking out of the graveyard, there are spawn tiles in the graveyard, so you need to be careful that you don't get caught by spawns there. When would I say is the best time to use the skip sandwich? In Boogey percent, I assume. So if you can use the skip sandwich to dodge enemy spawns, that's a very bold play. But I feel like with the randomizers, you get a lot of practice, so you get a good sense of where that's reasonable. 684. Wow. All right. And Des is going to be finished here just under 1 hour, 8 minutes, probably. That was a massive big bottle rocket. Skip sandwich. If you can use it to dodge enemies, I would say that's the number one use for the skip sandwich. If you never see a good opportunity to dodge those enemies, then all right, yeah, you can just use it to go walk fast somewhere. That's like the least optimal use for the skip sandwich, but it's better than not using it, so might as well. So yeah, hold on to it. Use it to dodge enemies when it seems appropriate. If that chance never arises, then heck with it. You better than nothing. Oh, I misjudged it. 1:08:01 for Dez. That is an excellent time. I would say that would be quite competitive for races going forward. The race time GG time is 1:08:07. One of the perks of Peaceful Rest Valley is actually that there are quite a few magic butterfly spawns, typically. Um, so if you do get caught by enemies, or if you are just trucking along on the normal route, you came here from fighting strong, you're missing all of your psychic points because you used them in the last fights, you can get them back with magic butterflies. Softnum just saw one of the common spawns, and then there's another two spawn plates that are very likely for butterflies. Why was this set as the endpoint for the race? The idea was that this is about 1/4 of the way through a glitchless run. Um, yeah, it's kind of the first major wall in vanilla. It's also between an hour, hour and a half to 2 hours, depending on runner. So, not an unreasonable amount of time to sit down and race. And Softnum's caught in another fight here. I see in race time, Softnum has forfeited from the race, which is unfortunate, but getting caught by a lot of spawns on the way, taking a number of deaths, certainly understandable. So, GG's to Dez. That is an excellent time. For Softnum, definitely understandable. I do not blame you for forfeiting here after multiple deaths. Good luck in your next races. This is the first round. This is the very first race of the Boogey Percent tournament for this season. So there's definitely more to come. As far as other races, I've mentioned it earlier this stream, but I will mention it again. We have another race. Let me try not to misspeak. I will actually go look now that we are no longer actively racing. 6:30 Central Time this evening. So 7:30 Eastern, 4:30 p.m. Pacific Time. We'll be live here with a race between Iconic and Rain. And I believe, let's see, Slug, IQ, and Derek. I'm not sure who exactly is going to be doing what there, but they'll be your hosting team. And there may also be another race, possibly between Hunter and McGurk, but that one is still not set in stone at this time. So, thank you very much, guys, for racing today. And I hope to see you all again this evening. I won't be doing comms, but I will probably at least show up in the chat. Yes, absolutely. Be sure to follow the racers. You can follow me if you want. I don't care. I don't stream that often. You do what you want. Thank you, everyone, for watching.